Mr. Harrow? Mr. Harrow, can you hear me? Nia Brooks pressed 2 fingers against the older man's wrist. The pulse was too fast, thready. His head lolled back against the leather chair, eyes unfocused. She'd already hit the emergency button. 4 minutes until help arrived. 4 minutes was a long time when someone's color was turning that particular shade of gray. Stay with me, sir. Nia elevated his feet with the wastebasket she'd just emptied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking through her chest. Breathe slowly. In through your nose. This wasn't her job. Nia Brooks cleaned offices. But when you're the only person on the 40th floor at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, your job description becomes whatever needs doing. What scared her most wasn't finding Elliot Harrow collapsed again. It was that this was the 3rd time in 2 months, and nobody else seemed to be counting. Elliot Harrow had built his empire on details, or so the bronze plaques in the lobby proclaimed. At 68, he still arrived before sunrise, still reviewed major contracts personally, still refused to admit his body had started failing him in small, humiliating ways. The dizziness began 6 months ago. Brief episodes he blamed on skipping breakfast. Then came nausea, confusion, the mortifying board presentation where he'd lost his train of thought mid-sentence and stood blinking at investors like a frightened child. Stress, his primary physician said with the confident dismissiveness of someone who'd never missed a meal. At your age, Mr. Harrow, perhaps delegate more? The cardiologist found nothing alarming. The neurologist suggested dietary changes. The internist prescribed vitamins and recommended yoga. Each specialist collected their fee and sent him home with reassurances. That felt like dismissals. Elliot stopped mentioning the episodes. Pride runs deep in self-made men. Admitting weakness felt like handing ammunition to the younger executives already circling his position. So he'd learned to grip the desk edge when dizziness hit, to excuse himself from meetings when nausea rolled through him, to smile and nod when people asked if he was all right. The only person who seemed to notice was someone he'd never actually spoken to, the night cleaner who worked the executive floor. While Elliot Harrow worried about legacy, Nia Brooks worried about making rent. She clocked in at Harrow Tower every weeknight at 9 p.m., part of the contracted crew that kept the gleaming offices camera-ready. The pay beat retail. The hours let her see Malik off to school each morning. And, most critical, the benefits package included health insurance she desperately needed after 3 uninsured years that still haunted her credit score. Nia had learned to be invisible in wealthy spaces. She moved efficiently, emptying trash cans that cost more than her car payment, dusting technology she'd never be able to afford. The art of not noticing had become her survival skill. Not noticing whispered arguments, prescription bottles in desk drawers, anything that might make her memorable. Memorable people got replaced by cheaper contractors. But invisibility had its advantages. When you're treated like furniture, people forget you have eyes. And Nia's eyes had been trained by 3 hard years caring for Aunt Carol through congestive heart failure, learning to read confusion before it became crisis, recognizing dehydration masked as irritability, spotting medication interactions before they cascaded into emergency rooms. So when patterns started emerging in Mr. Harrow's penthouse office, her caregiver instincts woke up despite every self-protective impulse screaming at her to stay quiet. It started small. Medication bottles multiplying on his private bathroom counter. Different brands, overlapping purposes, no obvious organizing system. A mini fridge stocked with green juices that sat untouched long enough to separate into unappetizing layers. Then Nia noticed the timing. Mr. Harrow's worst episodes clustered around specific days. After visits from his executive assistant Marcus. After his daughter Vanessa stopped by, the one whose framed photo smiled from the credenza, but whose actual presence left behind a tension you could almost taste. There was a lemony clean scent in his bathroom that didn't match any product the cleaning company used. The vitamin organizer on his desk, one of those elaborate weekly dispensers, sometimes contained pills that looked subtly different week to week, though the labels never changed. Nia tried to ignore it. This wasn't her business. She had Malik's orthodontist bills to consider, a car that needed new brakes, and a landlord who'd made it clear he was looking for any excuse to raise the rent. Getting involved in rich people's problems was a luxury she couldn't afford. But the loneliness, that was harder to ignore. Elliot Harrow had a secretary, 3 assistants, 2 adult children, and a staff of 40. Yet he spent his evenings in profound isolation. The gourmet breakfast in his office fridge rotted, uneaten. His schedule showed back-to-back meetings, but no doctor appointments, no personal time, no space for being human. Nia understood loneliness. She'd been raising Malik alone since his father walked out when he was 3, navigating systems that treated single black mothers as problems to manage rather than people to support. Her loneliness came from scarcity. Too little money, too little time, too little backup. Elliot's loneliness came from abundance so extreme it had replaced human connection with professional efficiency. Different sources, same hollow result. Their actual interaction had been minimal until she found him slumped over his desk at midnight, Mont Blanc pen still clutched in his hand. "Mr. Harrow?" She'd approached carefully, announcing her presence. "Sir, are you all right?" He jerked awake, disoriented, defensive. "What? I'm fine, just working." "You didn't look fine." The words came out before she could stop them. His expression hardened. "I don't require commentary from the cleaning staff." Nia stepped back immediately, professional mask sliding into place. "Of course. My apologies, sir." She'd finished quickly that night and said nothing to her supervisor. Rich people didn't appreciate observations from invisible workers, but the image stayed with her. A powerful man, vulnerable and alone, surrounded by people too busy managing his empire to notice he was disappearing. That night, she'd gotten home to find Malik still awake, headphones on, avoiding homework. "Mama, why you always getting home looking stressed?" he'd asked. "Just work, baby. You need to stop caring so much about other people's problems. We got our own." His 15-year-old wisdom stung because it was true. "Mr. Harrow, paramedics are coming." Nia watched his color slowly improve as he breathed deeply. "Don't try to talk yet." His eyes found her face. Confusion shifted to recognition. "You're the cleaner. Nia Brooks. This keeps happening." His voice was thin, frightened in a way that made him suddenly seem much older. "I don't understand why." Nia hesitated. The smart move was to wait for paramedics, fade back into invisibility, protect her job and Malik's stability. She thought about the orthodontist bill, the car brakes, her son's voice. "We got our own problems." But she also thought about Aunt Carol and how the system had failed her until Nia learned to advocate louder than was comfortable. "Mr. Harrow, when did you last eat? Actually eat, not what your calendar says." He blinked. "This morning? No, yesterday morning. A breakfast meeting." "And your medications? Who organizes them?" "Marcus handles that. My assistant. He sets up the weekly dispenser every Sunday." Something cold settled in Nia's stomach. The same recognition she'd felt watching Aunt Carol's routine being managed by well-meaning people who didn't actually pay attention. "Mr. Harrow, I think you need more than paramedics." "What do you mean?" The elevator dinged. Paramedics arriving, her window closing. Nia made a choice that would change everything. "I mean, someone's been changing things in your office, small things, and they line up with when you get sick." Elliot stared at her. "That's absurd. Marcus has been with me for 12 years. I'm sure." "He has, sir." Nia stood as the paramedics entered, stepping back into her invisible role. But before she did, she locked eyes with him. "I'm just saying, maybe someone should be counting. Will speaking up cost Nia everything she's worked for? And what is Elliot too proud to see about the people closest to him? Subscribe now to find out what happens when the invisible woman refuses to look away. and what she discovers that could save his life or destroy hers. The paramedics had taken Elliot Harrow to Presbyterian Hospital at 11:47 p.m. By 6:30 a.m., he was back in his penthouse office, looking pale, but insisting on a full schedule. Nia knew this because when she arrived for her shift that evening, there was a voicemail from her supervisor waiting. "Brooks, we need to talk about boundaries. Mr. Harrow's assistant filed a concern about inappropriate commentary during a medical emergency. Call me." Her hands went cold. Inappropriate commentary. That's what they called trying to help. She called back immediately, forcing her voice to stay steady. "This is Nia Brooks returning your call. Nia, look, I'm sure you meant well, but you can't be diagnosing clients or making accusations about their staff. Mr. Harrow's people are saying you implied his assistant was somehow responsible for his health episode." Her supervisor's tone was careful, practiced. "That's a liability issue. I didn't diagnose anything. I asked when he'd eaten, and suggested someone was changing things to make him sick. That's a serious accusation." A pause. "Marcus Chen has been with Harrow for over a decade. He's the one who called the paramedics initially, before you even found Mr. Harrow. He's concerned you're overstepping." The irony was sharp enough to cut. Marcus had called from home. The call log would show that. Nia had been the one doing chest compressions while waiting. "I understand," she said, "because arguing would only make it worse. It won't happen again." "Good, because we value you, Nia. But clients like Harrow Tower keep our contracts. You understand?" She understood. "Perfectly. Keep your head down. Stay invisible. Don't notice things that might embarrass wealthy people." "Mama, you can't be serious." Malik stood in their cramped kitchen the next morning, backpack already slung over his shoulder, staring at her like she'd lost her mind. "You almost got fired for helping some rich old man who probably doesn't even know your name?" "He knows my name now," Nia said quietly, pouring coffee into her thermos. "Great. That and $3 gets you a bus ride." Malik's voice carried that teenage edge between concern and frustration. "You know what happens if you lose that job? We lose the insurance. I can't play basketball without a physical. You can't afford your blood pressure meds. We're back to picking between groceries and rent." Every word was true. Nia had worked too hard climbing out of that hole to risk falling back in. "I know, baby." "Then why? You still thinking about it?" "I can see you thinking." Malik grabbed an apple from the bowl, his movements sharp with anxiety. "Mr. Patterson's mom works at that building, too. She told him they fire people all the time for way less than what you did. And they don't hire black folks back as easy as they let them go." "Language, Malik." "It's true, though." He softened slightly. "Look, I get it. You helped Aunt Carol. You can't help trying to fix people. But we're not in a position to be heroes, Mama. We're in a position to survive." Nia pulled him into a hug he pretended to resist. At 15, Malik was already taller than her, already carrying worries no teenager should have to carry. She'd taught him to be practical, to protect himself, to understand how the world worked for people who looked like them. She'd also taught him to care about what was right. Those lessons were colliding. Now, and she didn't have an answer that satisfied both. "I'm not trying to be a hero," she said into his shoulder. "I'm just trying to sleep at night." "Sleeping doesn't pay bills." But he hugged her back before pulling away. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Please." She promised. She meant it. But careful was becoming complicated. That night, Nia approached Harrow Tower with her stomach in knots. She'd rehearsed her apology, prepared herself to be professionally distant, accepted that some things weren't her responsibility to fix. Then she got to the 40th floor and saw the pattern. Continuing. Mr. Harrow's office lights were on at 10 p.m., unusual for someone who'd been hospitalized 12 hours earlier. Through the glass walls, she could see him at his desk, head in his hands. His daughter Vanessa sat across from him, perfectly styled in designer athleisure, scrolling through her phone while talking. Nia started her cleaning routine in the adjacent conference room, close enough to hear fragments through the door Vanessa had left carelessly open. "Can't keep doing this, Dad. The board is worried. Marcus says you've missed 3 meetings this month." "I was in the hospital, Vanessa. For observation. They said it was dehydration and stress. That's manageable." Vanessa's voice had that particular sharpness of someone who'd already decided how the conversation would end. "We think it's time to consider stepping back. Let Marcus handle more of the day-to-day. You could be chairman emeritus, still have your office, just less pressure. I'm 68, not dead. No one's saying that. We're saying you're not well, and pretending otherwise is affecting the company." A pause. Michael agrees. "We both think this is what's best." Michael was the son. The one whose photo wasn't even in the office. "What's best for me, or what's best for you?" Elliot's voice was tired, defeated. "That's not fair. Isn't it? You haven't visited in 4 months except to tell me I should retire. Your brother hasn't called in 6. But now that I'm having health issues, suddenly you're both very concerned about what's best." Vanessa stood abruptly. "I'm trying to help. If you can't see that, then maybe you really aren't capable of making decisions right now." She left without saying goodbye. Elliot sat alone in his office, looking exactly like what he was, an aging man whose children had already moved on. Nia felt her resolve wavering. This wasn't her problem. Malik was right. She had her own family to protect. But she also remembered Aunt Carol, and how the nursing home had kept saying everything was fine right up until it wasn't. How the people paid to care had been too busy to notice small changes that added up to neglect. How Nia had learned that sometimes caring required being inconvenient. Over the next week, Nia watched without interfering. Professional distance, boundaries, survival. But her eyes kept cataloging details. Sunday night, Marcus arrived at 8 p.m. to organize Mr. Harrow's week. He spent 20 minutes in the office, including time in the private bathroom where the medication dispenser lived. When he left, the pills in the Monday slot looked slightly different. Same color, slightly different shape. Tuesday, the green juice. Delivery came with 8 bottles instead of the usual 12. The label listed ingredients, but there was a small sticker on the bottom she'd never noticed before. Custom blend. External supplement added. Wednesday, Elliot had another episode. Mild this time, just dizziness and confusion. The private nurse came, checked his vitals, and left within 30 minutes. Her report, visible on his desk afterward, said, "Client displaying age-appropriate decline. Recommend continued monitoring." Age-appropriate decline at 68. Thursday, Nia found a prescription bottle in the trash. Elliot's name, but filled 3 weeks ago and already empty. The dosage was higher than the matching bottle still on his counter. Someone had switched them. Friday, Malik's school called. He'd been in a fight. The other kid had called him a scholarship case, and Malik had lost his temper. Suspension pending parent conference. Nia sat in the assistant principal's office at 2 p.m., exhausted from a sleepless day, listening to how Malik needed to manage his emotions better and represent the opportunity he'd been given with more maturity. She looked at her son, brilliant, angry, scared, and saw herself reflected back. They were both caught in systems that demanded perfect behavior while offering imperfect justice, both trying to do the right thing in situations designed to punish them for trying. "He'll apologize," Nia said, "because that's what survival required. It won't happen again." On the bus ride home, Malik stared out the window. "I'm sorry, Mama. I know. You gonna tell me I should have walked away? I'm gonna tell you that sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same, and that choosing which one matters is the hardest part of growing up." She took his hand. "I'm still learning that myself." That night, Nia arrived at work to find a small envelope on the cleaning cart with her name on it. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. "Ms. Brooks, I apologize for my assistant's complaint. Your concern was noted and appreciated. If you've observed anything else unusual, I would value your discretion and your honesty. E.H. Discretion and honesty. Two things that rarely coexisted in her world. Nia stood in the supply closet, note in hand, thinking about Malik's suspension and her supervisor's warning and the mortgage payment. Due in 6 days. She thought about Aunt Carol dying because no one listened to the home health aide who noticed things first. She thought about Elliot Harrow sitting alone in his empire, surrounded by people managing his decline instead of fighting it. Then she pulled out her phone and did something. That could cost her everything. She took photos, the pills in the dispenser, the custom juice bottles, the prescription bottles with mismatched dates, the nurse's dismissive report. She documented timestamps, visitor logs from the security desk she'd befriended, patterns she'd been cataloging in her head for weeks. If she was wrong, she'd be fired and possibly sued. If she was right and stayed quiet, she'd be complicit. Neither option was safe. But one of them let her look her son in the eye and tell him that sometimes you have to risk the smart choice to make the right one. Nia finished her shift, left the evidence in a sealed envelope in her locker, and went home to sleep for 3 hours before Malik's alarm went off. She'd made her decision. Now she had to figure out who to trust with the truth. What happens when doing the right thing means risking everything? And what will Nia discover about who's really controlling Elliot's care? And why? Subscribe now to find out if her evidence is enough to save him, or if speaking up will destroy the fragile stability she's fought so hard to build. The envelope stayed in Nia's locker for 3 days while she tried to convince herself to throw it away. On day 4, Elliot Harrow collapsed during a video conference with investors in Hong Kong. This time, there were witnesses. This time, it made the business news. This time, there were whispers about succession planning and cognitive decline and whether the board needed to intervene. Nia saw the headline on her phone during Malik's parent-teacher conference. Tech pioneer Elliot Harrow hospitalized again. Leadership questions mount. Ms. Brooks, are you listening? The teacher's voice pulled her back. I'm sorry. Yes. You were saying Malik's grades are slipping. Not just slipping. He's failing AP history and barely passing English. This isn't like him. The teacher, a young white woman who genuinely seemed concerned, leaned forward. Is everything okay at home? Everything was not okay at home. Malik was angry all the time. The suspension had cost him his starting position on the basketball team. His best friend's family had just been evicted, and now Malik watched Nia like he was waiting for the same thing to happen to them. The worry was eating him alive, turning him from her bright, curious boy into someone hard and defensive. We're managing, Nia said, because what else could she say? I'll talk to him about the homework. Ms. Brooks, I think it might be more than homework. The school counselor is available. We're fine, thank you. Nia stood, ending the conversation before it could go somewhere she couldn't afford to follow. In the parking lot, Malik was waiting by the bus stop, headphones on, deliberately not looking at her. You heard? He asked when she approached. I heard. You gonna yell? Nia was so tired she could barely stand. No, baby, I'm not gonna yell. That seemed to scare him more than anger would have. Mama, I'm trying. I just can't. I can't focus. I keep thinking about what happens if you lose your job because of that old man. If we have to move again. If I have to switch schools again. Malik, no, listen. I need you to promise me you're done with whatever you're doing. That you're gonna just clean the offices and come home, and that's it. His voice cracked. Please, Mama. I can't do this again. I can't watch us lose everything because you tried to help someone who don't even see you as human. The words hit like a physical blow. Because he was 15 and scared, and also because he wasn't. Entirely wrong. When Nia arrived at work that night, there was a note from building security. Mr. Harrow requests to see you before you begin your shift. 40th floor executive suite. Her supervisor had texted too. Do not engage beyond professional courtesy. Consider this your final warning. Nia took the elevator up with her heart hammering. This was it. Either she was being fired in person, or Elliot Harrow had actually read her note. She'd slipped it under his office door 2 nights ago, a brief, careful message. "Mr. Harrow, I have information about the patterns I mentioned. If you want to see it, I'll be on shift Thursday, Monday, 9 p.m., 5 a.m. If not, I understand. N. Brooks." The penthouse was empty except for Elliot, sitting in one of the guest chairs rather than behind his massive desk. He looked smaller than usual, older, vulnerable in a way that made her instinctively want to help, and simultaneously want to run. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming." "Of course, sir. Please sit. This won't take long." He waited until she perched awkwardly on the edge of a chair. "I read your note. I'd like to see what you found." Nia's throat went dry. "Mr. Harrow, I need to be clear. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not trying to diagnose anything. I've just noticed some patterns that reminded me of when I cared for my aunt, and I thought—" "Ms. Brooks," his voice was gentle, "I've spent 6 months being told by expensive doctors that I'm fine while feeling progressively worse. At this point, I'm willing to listen to anyone who's actually paying attention." So she showed him the photos on her phone, the timeline she'd created, the medication switches, the custom juice deliveries that coincided with his worst episodes, the visitor logs showing Marcus's Sunday night prep sessions, right before Elliot's Monday morning dizzy spells. Elliot's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, anger, hurt, and finally a terrible understanding. "Marcus has been with me for 12 years, he said quietly. "I know, sir. He was at my wife's funeral. He sent flowers when my grandson was born. Elliot's voice broke slightly. "Why would he do this?" "I don't know, but I think you need to find out before it gets worse." Nia's hands were shaking. "And sir, I think you need to do it carefully, because I tried to raise concerns through proper channels and I nearly got fired. People don't want to believe that someone trusted could be poisoning me." The word hung in the air between them. "I don't know if it's that deliberate. Maybe he's just managing you, keeping you weak enough that you rely on him, or making decisions in your name. Maybe there's a financial angle I can't see from my position." Nia met his eyes. "But something is wrong, and it's getting worse, and you're running out of time to fix it before something permanent happens." Elliot was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "Sir, you've risked your job bringing this to me. You've documented evidence. You've done more than anyone else in my life has done in 6 months." His voice hardened with something that looked like resolve. "What do you need to feel safe while we figure this out?" The question was so unexpected that Nia almost laughed. What did she need? Job security? Health insurance? A guarantee that Malik wouldn't suffer for her choices. A world where helping someone didn't require risking everything. "I need you to not tell anyone we had this conversation. I need to keep my job while you investigate. And I need you to promise that, if this goes badly, you won't let them make me the problem. You have my word." Elliot stood, offering his hand. "And Ms. Brooks, thank you for seeing what everyone else chose to ignore." They shook hands, billionaire and cleaning woman, unlikely allies in a fight that was just beginning. Elliot started his investigation carefully. He told Marcus he was taking a brief vacation, a wellness retreat his doctor had recommended. Instead, he stayed in his penthouse and watched. Nia watched too, from her invisible position. Sunday night, Marcus arrived right on schedule. He went through his usual routine, organizing files, setting up the week's calendar, entering the private bathroom where the medications lived. He emerged 12 minutes later, vitamin dispenser freshly loaded. Monday morning, Elliot didn't take the vitamins. Instead, he pocketed them and replaced them with identical-looking supplements from a bottle he'd purchased himself. Then he went about his day. By 2 p.m., he texted Nia, "No episode. First time in 4 months. Tuesday, same thing. Wednesday, same thing." By Thursday, the pattern was undeniable. But Thursday night, Marcus noticed, Nia was cleaning the conference room. when she heard his voice rise in Elliot's office. "You haven't been taking your supplements. The dispenser is still full from Monday." "I've been feeling better. Thought I'd give my system a break." Elliot's voice was carefully neutral. "That's exactly the kind of decision you shouldn't be making. Alone. You're not thinking clearly, Elliot. That's why I'm here, to keep you on track." "I appreciate that, Marcus, but I think I'm capable of deciding what goes into my own body." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then Marcus's voice, lower, harder. "Of course. But when the board asks me how you're managing your health, I have to be honest about what I observe. And if you're not following basic medical protocols, that raises questions about your judgment." It was a threat. Polite, professional, but absolutely a threat. Nia's phone buzzed. A text from Malik. "Coach says I can try out for JV if my grades come up. Can you help me with history homework tomorrow?" Her son, trying, hopeful, trusting that she'd be there. And here she was, caught in someone else's crisis, risking the stability he needed. But when she looked through the glass at Elliot Harrow, isolated, manipulated, trapped by someone he'd trusted, she couldn't unsee it, couldn't walk away, couldn't be the person who chose comfortable silence over difficult truth. She texted Malik back, "Of course, baby, I'll be there. Promise." Then she went back to work, knowing that keeping both promises might be impossible. The investigation has begun, but so have the threats. Can Elliot prove what's happening before Marcus realizes he's been caught? And can Nia protect her family while helping expose the truth? Subscribe now to discover what happens when the comfortable lies start to crack, and who will do anything to keep them hidden. The lab results came back on a Wednesday. Elliot had the vitamins from Marcus's dispenser independently tested at a private laboratory, paying extra for discretion and speed. Nia wasn't there when he opened the envelope, but she saw the aftermath. Elliot sitting alone in his office at Hawaii. Midnight. The report spread across his desk, his hands shaking. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "Mr. Harrow? You're here late." He looked up, and she saw something broken in his expression. "They're contaminated, not poisoned, nothing that dramatic, but they contain excessive amounts of sedatives mixed with compounds that interact badly with my blood pressure medication. Enough to cause dizziness, confusion, nausea, enough to make me seem like I'm declining." His voice was hollow. "It's been deliberate. For months." Nia had suspected, had documented, had prepared herself for this confirmation. But hearing it said aloud still felt like a punch to the chest. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Elliot laughed bitterly. "Call the police? Press charges against a man I've trusted for over a decade? Expose that I've been systematically drugged in my own office and was too blind to see it?" He rubbed his face. "The board already thinks I'm losing my edge. This will just confirm it. Or it proves you were being sabotaged by my assistant, who has access to everything, my files, my accounts, my calendar, who's been making decisions in my name while I was too foggy to notice." Elliot's voice dropped. "Ms. Brooks, I need to know how deep this goes, what else Marcus has done. But I can't investigate without him knowing, and the moment he knows, he'll destroy evidence or—" He didn't finish, but they both understood. Marcus had been keeping Elliot weak and dependent. If he realized that control was slipping, there was no telling what he might do to preserve it. "You need help," Nia said. "Real help, legal help, medical professionals who can document what's been done to you. I need proof that will hold up, and I need someone I can trust." Elliot met her eyes. "Would you be willing to testify if it comes to that?" The question hung in the air between them. Testify. Go on record. Make herself visible in the most dangerous way possible. "Let me think about it," Nia said, though they both knew thinking about it meant weighing her son's future against an old man's justice. Nia tried doing it the right way first. She went to HR, not Harrow Tower's internal HR, they answered to the same board that employed Marcus, but to the corporate office of the cleaning company that contracted her. She brought her documentation, explained her concerns professionally, and waited for someone to take her seriously. The HR representative, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, listened politely while typing notes. "So you're alleging that a Harrow Tower executive is tampering with Mr. Harrow's medication?" "I'm not alleging. I'm showing you a pattern of—" "Ms. Brooks, you understand this is an extremely serious accusation? Against a high-level employee of our most important client?" Sandra's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Do you have any medical training?" "No, but—" "Any formal education in pharmacology or healthcare?" "I was a caregiver for my aunt for 3 years." Sandra's expression said everything. Nia watched the woman's professionalism turn into patronizing concern. "I appreciate that you're worried about Mr. Harrow's well-being. That speaks well of your character. But making unfounded accusations about medication tampering is serious. It could be considered defamation. I have photos, timestamps, lab results that Mr. Harrow obtained himself, which you had no authorization to collect. Ms. Brooks, do you understand that taking photos of a client's private space, including medication bottles, is a violation of your confidentiality?" "Agreement?" Sandra's voice softened artificially. "I'm trying to help you here. If Mr. Harrow or his team wanted to pursue this, you could be terminated and potentially sued." The ground shifted under Nia's feet. Somehow, in trying to report a crime, she'd become the liability. "So what should I do?" "Focus on your job. Let Mr. Harrow's medical team handle his health concerns. And delete those photos before someone decides they constitute corporate espionage." Sandra closed her laptop. "This conversation is off the record, but consider it a warning. Stay in your lane, Ms. Brooks, for your own protection." Nia left the office feeling like she'd been slapped. She'd done everything right, documented carefully, reported through proper channels, stayed professional, and somehow she was the problem. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Malik's school. "Ms. Brooks, this is Principal Morrison. Malik was involved in another incident today. We're going to need you to come in immediately." The incident was that Malik had confronted a teacher who'd made a comment about kids who can't focus probably have chaotic home lives. In front of the entire class, Malik had said, "My mama works 2 jobs to keep us stable while y'all sit here judging. Maybe the chaos is your low expectations." The principal called it disrespectful. Nia called it her 15-year-old son breaking under pressure she'd created. "He's suspended for 3 days, Principal Morrison said from across his desk, Malik sitting rigid beside her. "One more incident, Ms. Brooks, and we'll have to consider whether this is the right placement for him." Translation: one more incident, and they'd kick him out of the good school, the one with AP classes and college counselors, the one Nia had fought to get him into. In the car, Malik stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "Baby, you can't—" "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't tell me I can't defend myself. Don't tell me to be quiet while people talk down to me. You taught me to stand up for what's right, remember? That's different." "How? How is it different?" He finally looked at her, and his eyes were bright with angry tears. "You're risking everything for some rich man who probably doesn't even remember your name. But when I stand up for us, for you, I'm the one in the wrong? Malik, that's not fair. None of this is fair. You think I don't know you went to HR? You think I don't hear you on the phone at night, worrying about getting fired? I'm watching you destroy our lives for someone else's problem. And you want me to just sit quiet and take whatever they throw at me?" His voice cracked. "I can't do both, Mama. I can't watch. You be brave and be scared at the same time." Nia pulled into a parking lot because her hands were shaking too hard to drive. She sat there with her son, both of them crying, both of them trapped between who they wanted to be and who the world allowed them to be. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "You're right. I'm asking too much of both of us. So you'll stop? You'll just do your job and let him figure it out?" Nia wanted to say yes, wanted to choose her son's safety over everything else. But she kept seeing Elliot's face when he'd read those lab results, the devastation of realizing someone he'd trusted had been slowly destroying him. I'm going to try to find a way to do both, she said, to help him and protect us. But baby, if I can't, if it comes down to a choice, you come first. Always. Malik wiped his face. That shouldn't have to be a choice. No, it shouldn't. That night, Nia arrived at work to find her access card disabled. Security looked uncomfortable. Ms. Brooks, you're not on tonight's schedule. There's been a reassignment. Reassignment? You'll need to speak with your supervisor. Her supervisor didn't answer her phone. Neither did the backup number. Nia sat in her car in the parking garage, understanding with cold clarity what had happened. HR had reported her concerns to Harrow Tower. Someone, probably Marcus, had flagged her as a security risk. Now she was being quietly removed. No formal firing, no paper trail, just a schedule change. That would keep changing until she quit on her own. Nia was about to start her car when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Patricia Chen from Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about Elliot Harrow. He listed you as an emergency contact. He's been admitted. It's serious. Then the world tilted. What happened? He collapsed at home. His private nurse called it in as a possible stroke, but his symptoms are consistent with acute toxicity. Ms. Brooks, when the paramedics arrived, he specifically asked them to contact you and to secure his medication. He said you'd understand. Nia understood perfectly. Marcus had realized Elliot was investigating, and he'd escalated. Is he going to be okay? We're running tests now, but Ms. Brooks, he asked me to tell you to be careful. He seemed very concerned about your safety. After she hung up, Nia sat in the dark parking garage, suspended between fear and fury. She'd tried the official route. She'd reported through proper channels. She'd been professional and careful and responsible. And now Elliot was in the hospital. She was out of a job, and Marcus was still free to cover his tracks. There was only one option left. The dangerous one. The one that meant going public, risking everything, and trusting that the truth would matter more than her position in the hierarchy. Nia pulled out her phone and started making calls. To the local news investigative reporter who'd done a piece on elder abuse in corporate settings. To a lawyer who did pro bono work for whistleblowers. To Elliot's estranged son Michael, whose number she'd found in the office directory. If the system wouldn't protect them, she'd build her own protection, even if it cost her everything. Nia's tried playing by the rules, and the rules have failed. Now Elliot's in the hospital, her job is gone, and time is running out. Will she risk total exposure to save him? And what will she discover about how deep the conspiracy goes? Subscribe to find out what happens when an invisible woman refuses to disappear and what price both she and Elliot will pay. For the truth. The investigative reporter's name was Diana Reeves, and she'd built her career on stories that made powerful people uncomfortable. Let me understand this correctly, Diana said over the phone at 7 a.m. the next morning. You're a contracted cleaning worker, claiming that a billionaire's executive assistant has been systematically drugging him for months. You have photographic evidence you collected without authorization, and you were just removed from your position for raising concerns. When Diana put it that way, Nia understood how impossible it sounded. I know how. It looks, Ms. Brooks, it looks like either the story of the year or a lawsuit waiting to happen. Possibly both. Diana's voice shifted, became more serious. But I've been following Elliot Harrow's health episodes. The business press has been reporting them as cognitive decline, potential early dementia. If someone's been manufacturing those symptoms, that's not just elder abuse, it's corporate fraud on a massive scale. So, you'll investigate? I'll look at your evidence. But I need more than photos of pill bottles. I need the lab results, medical testimony, and ideally, I need Elliot. Harrow willing to go on record. A pause. How's his condition? Critical but stable. They're still running toxicology tests. Nia had called the hospital 3 times already. He's conscious but weak. Then we move fast, before anyone can destroy evidence or pressure him into silence. Diana's tone became businesslike. Send me everything you have. And Ms. Brooks, be prepared for this to get ugly. When you expose powerful people, they don't go down quietly. Nia had already lost her job. Her son was suspended and terrified. She was 3 weeks from not making rent. How much uglier could it get? She was about to find out. Nia arrived at Mercy General at 10 a.m., using the visitor access Elliot had specifically authorized. The private nurse who'd called 911, a young woman named Sarah who looked exhausted and scared, met her in the hallway outside his room. "He's been asking for you." "But Ms. Brooks, you should know. Marcus Chen is in there right now, with Mr. Harrow's daughter Vanessa and their corporate attorney." Sarah's voice dropped. "They're talking about medical power of attorney, about moving him to a private facility where he can recover without media scrutiny. Translation, where they could control the narrative and silence him. Does Mr. Harrow know? He's alert but medicated, and they keep telling him it's for his own good." Sarah met her eyes. "I'm not supposed to say this, but when I told the doctors about the medication irregularities you documented, they found compounds in his system that shouldn't be there. The attending physician wanted to contact the police, but the family lawyer shut it down, said it was a private medical matter." Everything in Nia's body screamed at her to run. This wasn't her world. Corporate lawyers and family politics, and battles fought with legal language she barely understood. But then she thought about Elliot's face when he'd realized what Marcus had done. The betrayal, the fear. "Can you get me 5 minutes with him? Alone?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I'll tell them there's paperwork I need them to sign." "At the nurse's station. But make it fast." When Nia entered the hospital room, Elliot looked smaller than she'd ever seen him. IV lines snaked from his arms. Monitors beeped steadily. His color was better than she'd feared, but his eyes held a confusion that terrified her. "Ms. Brooks," his voice was hoarse. "They told me you'd been let go. I tried to call the contract company, but Marcus said he'd handle it." "I'm sure he did." Nia moved to his bedside. "Mr. Harrow, we don't have much time. Your family and Marcus are trying to move you to a private facility. Once they do, you'll lose control of your own medical care. Vanessa says it's for the best, that I need rest and privacy. What do you think you need?" The question seemed to ground him. Elliot's eyes focused, sharpened. "I think I need people to stop making decisions for me like I'm already dead." "Then you need to make a decision right now, and you need to make it clear." Nia pulled out her phone, showing him the email thread with Diana Reeves. "I contacted an investigative journalist. She's willing to run the story about what Marcus did, but only if you're willing to go on record. If you confirm the lab results, the timeline, the systematic drugging, that would destroy his career, possibly put him in prison. He tried to destroy you, possibly tried to kill you." Nia's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Harrow, Marcus wasn't just keeping you weak. The investigative reporter found financial records. He's been making executive decisions in your name, approving contracts that benefit companies he has stakes in, slowly positioning himself to take over when you were declared incompetent." Elliot closed his eyes. 12 years. He was at my wife's funeral. "I know, and I'm sorry, but right now you have to choose. Protect the man who did this to you, or protect yourself and everyone else he might target next." The door opened. Marcus entered, perfectly composed in an expensive suit, followed by Vanessa and a sharp-eyed woman in legal attire. "Ms. Brooks." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm surprised to see you here. I was under the impression your contract had been terminated. Mr. Harrow asked me to come." "Did he?" Marcus turned to Elliot with practiced concern. "Elliot, you're confused. The medication and stress have affected your judgment. That's why we're here, to make sure you get the care you need." "I'm not confused." Elliot's voice was weak but clear. "And I didn't ask for you to be here, Marcus." The room went silent. Marcus's expression flickered, just for a second, with something dark before the concerned assistant mask slid back into place. "Elliot, please, you're not well. Let us help you." "Help me the way you've been helping me for the past 6 months, by drugging my vitamins?" Elliot's words landed like bombs. "I had them tested, Marcus. Independent lab. I know what you did. Vanessa stepped forward. Dad, what are you talking about? Tell. Her, Marcus. Elliot's eyes never left his assistant's face. Tell her about the sedatives mixed with blood pressure medication interactions. About the custom supplements designed to make me appear cognitively impaired. About the financial decisions you've been making in my name while I was too foggy to notice. The lawyer started to speak, but Marcus held up a hand. When he spoke, his voice had changed. No more concerned assistant, just cold calculation. You can't prove any of that. The lab results prove pills were contaminated, not that I contaminated them. Your own medical history shows cognitive decline. And even if you could prove something, going public means admitting you were incompetent enough to be manipulated for months. The board will remove you anyway. Maybe. Elliot reached for the call button, and suddenly the room filled with people. Hospital security, the attending physician, and, Nia saw with relief, 2 police officers. But I'd rather be removed for being manipulated than die while everyone watches and calls it natural decline. Mr. Chen, one of the officers said, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding the allegations of tampering with prescription medications and potential elder abuse. Marcus's composure finally cracked. He looked at Nia with pure hatred. This is your doing, a cleaning woman who couldn't mind her own business. No, Elliot said firmly. This is your doing. She just refused to be silent about it. 2 hours. Later, Nia sat in a hospital waiting room while lawyers and police and hospital administrators swirled around Elliot's case. Diana Reeves had arrived with a camera crew. Vanessa was crying in the hallway, torn between defending her father and processing that someone she'd trusted had been harming him. Michael, the estranged son, had flown in and was demanding answers from everyone. And Nia just wanted to go home to her son. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. Ms. Brooks? This is Jennifer Ward from Harrow Towers Board of Directors. I understand you were instrumental in uncovering the situation with Mr. Chen. We'd like to offer you a formal position as a patient advocate and care coordinator for Mr. Harrow during his recovery. The position includes full benefits, salary, and legal protection for your testimony. It was exactly what she needed. Job security, protection, a way forward. But it was also exactly what made her uncomfortable, being rescued by the same system that had tried to silence her. Can I think about it? Of course. But Ms. Brooks, you should know. Mr. Harrow specifically requested you. He said you're the only person who saw him as human instead of an asset. When Nia finally made it home at 6 p.m., Malik was at the kitchen table, actually doing homework. He looked up when she entered, his expression cautious. I saw the news. They're saying some assistant was poisoning that billionaire. They showed your picture, said you were the whistleblower. Nia sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Yeah, Mama. Malik's voice was small. Did we just get famous for the wrong reasons? I don't know, baby. Maybe. Or maybe we got famous for doing the right thing and people will see it that way. Are we going to be okay? Nia thought about the job. Offer, the legal battles ahead, the media attention, the uncertainty. Then she looked at her son and saw something she hadn't seen in months. Respect. Yeah, we're going to be okay. Different maybe, but okay. The truth is finally out, but the real battle is just beginning. Can Nia and Elliot survive? The aftermath of exposure? What happens when justice requires sacrificing privacy, safety, and everything familiar? Subscribe now for the final chapter, where we discover what healing really looks like when the whole world is watching. 3 months after Marcus Chen was arrested, Elliot Harrow still wasn't fully recovered. The toxicology reports had revealed a sophisticated pattern of compounds designed to mimic age-related cognitive decline without triggering obvious red flags. Marcus had been careful, methodical, and almost successful. The physical symptoms would fade with time and proper medical care, but the psychological damage, the broken trust, the humiliation, the fear would take much longer to heal. Nia watched this process from her new position as patient care advocate, a role Elliot's board had created specifically for her after the story broke. The title was impressive. The salary was more money than she'd ever made. The health benefits covered things she'd only dreamed about, including therapy for both her and Malik, which they'd both desperately needed. But the reality was messier than any job description could capture. "Miss Brooks, I need you to tell the physical." "Therapist, I'm fine," Elliot said during a Tuesday afternoon session, his voice carrying that familiar stubborn edge. 3 months of recovery hadn't diminished his pride. "Mr. Harrow, I need you to stop lying to medical professionals," Nia replied calmly, not looking up from the care log she was documenting. "You're not fine. Your balance is still affected, and pretending otherwise just delays your recovery." The physical therapist, a patient woman named Gloria, hid a smile. This had become their routine. Elliot testing boundaries, Nia refusing to enable him, actual healing happening in the tension between those two positions. "I've run a company for 40 years, Elliot grumbled. "I think I know my own body." "Your body is why we're here, sir. Because you didn't know it as well as you thought, and someone took advantage of that." Nia finally looked up, her expression gentle but firm. "You hired me to tell you the truth. That's what I'm doing." Elliot held her gaze for a moment, then sighed. "Fine, Gloria, let's continue." Small victories. That's what recovery looked like. Not dramatic transformations, but incremental progress measured in honest conversations, and slightly better. Balance each week. The story had exploded exactly as Diana Reeves predicted. Billionaire systematically drugged by trusted assistant made national headlines. The business press dissected every financial decision Marcus had manipulated. The human interest angle. Cleaning woman saves tech. Pioneer's life went viral on social media. Nia hated every minute of it. Strangers recognized her at the grocery store. Her phone number got leaked, resulting in interview requests from morning shows and podcast hosts. Someone started a GoFundMe in her name without asking, raising $30,000 before she could shut it down and donate it to elder care advocacy organizations. Malik handled it worse than she did. "They're calling you the hero housekeeper on Twitter," he said one morning, showing her his phone with a mixture of pride and discomfort. "Some people are saying nice things. Some people are saying you only did it for money or attention." "What do you think?" Nia asked. "I think you did it because you can't watch people suffer and do nothing, even when doing something costs us." Malik's voice was thoughtful, more mature than his 15 years should require. "I think I was wrong to ask you to choose between helping him and protecting us. Those aren't opposites." Nia pulled him into a hug, grateful for the therapy sessions that had helped them process the trauma of those terrifying weeks when everything hung in the balance. "You weren't wrong to be scared." "Baby, I was scared too. But you did it anyway." "So did you. You defended me even when it cost you. That's the same kind of bravery." She pulled back to look at him. "How are things at school?" Malik's suspension had been reversed after the story broke, the principal suddenly very interested in supporting students from challenging circumstances. The reversal felt hollow, but Malik had returned to find unexpected support from classmates who'd seen his mother's courage and started treating him differently, with respect instead of pity. "Better. Coach says I can rejoin the team for playoffs if I keep my grades up." And the history teacher apologized for the chaotic home life comment. He grinned slightly. "Turns out my home life is less chaotic than some billionaire's penthouse." Progress. Imperfect, complicated, real. Vanessa and Michael's relationship with their father didn't transform overnight into something warm and functional. Reality wasn't that tidy. Vanessa spent the first month in therapy processing guilt. She genuinely believed Marcus when he'd suggested her father was declining, had genuinely thought pushing for retirement was protective rather than enabling. The realization that her absence had made her father vulnerable to manipulation shattered something in her. "I should have visited more," she told Nia during an awkward conversation in Elliot's hospital suite. I should have paid attention instead of just managing him from a distance. Yes, Nia said simply, because platitudes wouldn't help anyone. But you're paying attention now. That's what matters going forward. Michael was angrier, colder. He'd written his father off years ago after a business disagreement, and discovering that Elliot had nearly died while Michael nursed old grudges forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about pride and family. But they were trying. That's what Nia documented in her care logs. Not perfect reconciliation, but genuine effort. Weekly video calls that sometimes ended in arguments but happened consistently. Vanessa bringing her children to visit. Their grandfather rebuilding connections one supervised hour at a time. Michael showing up to physical therapy sessions and asking gruff questions about recovery timelines. Elliot, for his part, had to learn something harder than any business strategy. How to accept help without shame. How to be vulnerable without feeling diminished. How to trust again after betrayal. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he told Nia during one of their daily check-ins. How Marcus isolated me gradually. How I confused efficiency with loyalty. How I built an empire but forgot to build relationships that could sustain me when the empire couldn't. Mr. Harrow, you were targeted by someone skilled at manipulation. That's not a personal failure, isn't it? A man my age, with my resources, should have been protected. Instead, it took someone making minimum wage to actually see what was happening. His voice was heavy with something that looked like humility. That says something about how I structured my life, about what I valued and what I ignored. So value it differently now, Nia said. You can't undo the past, but you can decide who you want to be during recovery and after. It was the same advice her therapist had given her about processing trauma. The past happened. The future was still negotiable. Marcus Chen pled guilty to elder abuse, fraud, and drug-related charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 8 years. The district attorney had wanted to push for attempted murder, but proving intent was complicated when the substances used were designed to incapacitate rather than kill. 8 years felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. The financial investigation revealed Marcus had siphoned approximately $4 million through manipulated contracts and shell companies, money he'd used to fund a lifestyle beyond his salary. He'd justified it to himself as compensation for years of service, convinced that Elliot owed him more than gratitude. During the sentencing hearing, Marcus's lawyer painted him as a dedicated employee who'd made terrible decisions under financial pressure. The prosecution painted him as a calculating predator who'd targeted a vulnerable employer. The truth, Nia suspected, lived somewhere in the complicated middle, a person who'd convinced himself that his grievances justified his crimes. Nia attended the hearing with Elliot. When the judge asked if he wanted to make a statement, Elliot stood with Nia's help. Marcus Chen worked for me for 12 years. I trusted him with my life, and he used that trust to harm me for profit. But beyond the personal betrayal, I want the court to understand what this case represents, how vulnerable aging people are to those we depend on, how easily systems fail to protect us, and how often the people who see abuse first, caregivers, support staff, the so-called invisible workers, are dismissed when they try to report it. Elliot's voice was steady. Ms. Brooks risked her livelihood to tell the truth when every official channel failed. That shouldn't be necessary. We need better protections, better oversight, and better respect for the people who care for us when we're most vulnerable. The judge nodded thoughtfully before delivering the sentence. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Diana Reeves interviewed them both for her follow-up piece. Mr. Harrow, what's next for you? Recovery, family, and working with legislators to strengthen protections for elder care and create better whistleblower protections for domestic and care workers. He glanced at Nia. Ms. Brooks has agreed to help me develop those initiatives. Her expertise is more valuable than any consultant I could hire. Ms. Brooks, how has your life changed? Nia thought about the job, the security, the therapy, Malik's renewed confidence. Then she thought, about the loss of privacy, the ongoing media attention, the complicated feelings about being labeled a hero for doing what should have been basic decency. It's changed in ways I'm still processing, but I hope it's changed in a way that makes the next person like me feel safer speaking up. That's the only way this matters, if it makes the system better for everyone. Elliot Harrow returned to limited duties at his company, not as CEO, but as chairman emeritus with clearly defined boundaries and oversight. The board had implemented new protocols for executive health monitoring and medication management. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. His relationship with Vanessa remained cautious but improving. Michael visited monthly, their conversations stilted but genuine. Elliot had started weekly dinners with both children and their families, learning his grandchildren's names and interests instead of just sending expensive gifts. His recovery plateaued at about 85% of his former physical capacity. The cognitive effects had resolved, but his balance never fully returned. He used a cane now without shame, having learned that asking for help was strength, not weakness. Nia Brooks became the director of a new foundation Elliot established, the Invisible Advocates Initiative, dedicated to supporting and protecting domestic workers, caregivers, and others who provide essential services in private settings. The work was challenging, meaningful, and allowed her to turn her experience into systemic change. Malik made honor roll and rejoined the basketball team. His college essay, written junior year, would be about watching his mother choose courage over comfort and learning that heroism rarely looked the way movies suggested. It looked like exhausted people making hard choices with no guarantee of good outcomes. One evening, during a foundation planning meeting at Elliot's home office, Nia looked around the room. Elliot reviewing care worker policy proposals, Vanessa contributing legal expertise, Michael offering business connections, 3 advocacy organizations represented, and her own voice being heard as an equal rather than as support staff. "Ms. Brooks, what do you think?" Elliot asked, genuinely waiting for her answer. And Nia thought about how far they'd both come, not through miraculous transformation, but through painful honesty, difficult conversations, and the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding trust and systems that had failed them both. "I think we're making progress," she said. "Not perfect, but real." That was the truth they'd both learned. Healing wasn't about returning to some perfect state. It was about accepting damage, doing the hard work of recovery, and building something more honest in the broken places. Recovery was messy. Justice was incomplete. Relationships required constant maintenance. But dignity, the kind that came from being seen, being heard, and being valued, that was possible. Even when everything else was imperfect, especially then. Because sometimes the most powerful rescue doesn't come from wealth or status, but from one person refusing to look away. And sometimes the greatest healing happens not when problems disappear, but when people finally see each other as fully human. Thank you for following Nia and Elliot's journey. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share, because real change happens when we refuse to stay silent about the invisible struggles happening all around us. Every person deserves to be seen. Every voice deserves to be heard. And every act of courage, no matter how small it seems, has the power to change lives.